can go ahead and get started.
Good evening, everyone. Residents need a more walkable, bikeable city with safe streets and accessible to all. While we are thankful for our hardworking truck drivers who support businesses by bringing in supplies into our community, this study will help create solutions that put through traffic trucks where they can operate the most effectively and safely on routes that do not traverse dense residential neighborhoods. Note that this plan focuses on refocusing trucks that don't have Hudson destinations. All of the plans continue to allow for local delivery by truck. I want to thank our Assembly member, Dee Barrett, and New York State for providing funds for this project. I also want to thank DPW Commissioner Peter Bujano and DPW Superintendent Rob Perry for supporting this project. I also want to thank everyone in our community for their support of this project. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting, and thank you to the 276 people who completed our recent survey, as well as the 329 people who completed survey number 1. I look forward to hearing the presentation from MJ Engineering and your comments. Now I'm going to pass it off to the Mayor's aide, Michael Komitas.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. So for decades, residents of Hudson and the community have worked to understand and improve the truck route. The 2002 comprehensive plan calls for a truck study. The 2011 local waterfront revitalization plan states the city intends to work with state and federal representatives to address the impact of non-local truck traffic through the city. So this has really been a long-term project in the works. And what's going on starting last year and into 2021, this is a really important step. This is where we're going to create a data-informed understanding of the current conditions, as well as some named alternatives. And we need to do more, though, than just show that people don't like the current truck route. We need to demonstrate that the community as a whole, that includes both Hudson and our surrounding communities, are really better off with one of these alternative routes. So it's not just simply enough to say, I don't like the truck route, because the risk is that wherever we move it, someone else will say, I don't like that other place. So we really do need to show why these alternates are better than the current system. And so the way we're going to do that is through a data-informed analysis. We also need to look at a lot of different issues, including equity, economic development, health, safety, population density, infrastructure. And we need to do this, so we also need to build a coalition of support, one that goes beyond Hudson residents. Ultimately, this is a New York State decision, and this is with the county's going to have a lot of influence, and so we need to have partners in and outside of Hudson to get a successful project. And so right now, the current truck route goes through some of the most densely populated areas of the county, as well as some of the areas that have the highest poverty rate and some of the areas that have the highest rates of people of color. So there's something, it's not really the way that we should be designing truck routes to go through these dense populated areas. But from a planning perspective, we also have to keep in mind that if we move the truck route, we also need to consider how we're going to help the people who still live here, because the risk is that if you move the truck route, does that increase property values, and the people that we're trying to help are then forced out. So some of these issues are really beyond the scope of this study. The study isn't going to address those planning issues around housing and displacement, but it's something that we need to be keeping in mind for a larger context. But getting back to the study, what this study does do is it's an important step it's really the first time that we've had an engineering firm study the project area, propose solutions, engage the community, and then document their whole process and the findings throughout. And so this is a key step. While it's been decades long project, this is really a jumping off point for us to get some real solutions. So I'm really glad to be working with MJ Engineering. They bring expertise to this issue. They've worked on several similar projects. We were working really closely with Brian Cooper and Chad Schneider from MJ Engineering. Andrew Gilchrist is on the call as well, is providing additional support. And what they've created is a really professional and detailed assessment of the current conditions and some alternative routes. And so have been impressed with the work that they've done to date. And at this time, I'll turn it over to them.
Thanks, Michael. Tonight, we're just going to go real quick through the agenda for the meeting tonight. Andrew's going to walk everybody through the Zoom webinar, how to answer questions and how to operate in the Zoom webinar. We'll talk about our feasibility study objectives and goals, the project steps, the feasibility study process, our data collection summary. This is a accumulation of the first public meeting we had, plus the draft data collection report that we prepared. The existing truck routes in the summary, harms and risks of trucks in Hudson. We'll touch on our online survey number 1 and go over some of the results for that. Types of options that we've considered, alternate truck route options, the preferred routes that we came up with, and of course, online survey 2, which just ended last week, and then the next steps for the project. At the end of the presentation, again, I think Andrew will revisit the Zoom webinar how-to. We'll take your questions and answers following the presentation. Andrew?
Great, thank you. So there are several ways that participants can participate this evening. The first way is through a series of participant polls, which will come up throughout the presentation. So we do encourage folks to participate in those. In order to do the polls, it'll come up right on your screen, either on your computer screen or your mobile device. The other way that folks can participate is at the end of the presentation during the Q&A session. The way that you do that, there are 2 different ways to do that. So if you'd like to write a comment to us, you can use the Q&A chat function. Just look in the bottom of your Zoom panel, and you should see a Q&A button there. That'll open up the Q&A, so you can type in your question or your comment. Or you can use the raise hand feature, which is in your Zoom webinar panel as well. And if you click on the raise hand during the Q&A session, we'll call on you, and you can speak to us and tell us your question or comment, and we'll answer them live. If you're on a telephone, you can use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. And again, we'll describe this again at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. And again, following the webinar this evening, we will continue to accept comments. You can submit written comments to the project email at hudsontruckstudy@gmail.com. We will accept comments up to May 4th for this project. And also a reminder that a recording of this webinar and a copy of the presentation will be posted on the city website at the link on your screen there. And back to you, Brian. Oh, back to me.
Back to you.
Back to me. So we do have a poll, so I will go ahead and launch that. So for our first poll, we want to learn a little bit more about you all this evening. How would you best describe your association with the project area? You can select all that apply. Are you a City of Hudson resident, a commuter, a business owner or store manager, or other? And we'll give folks just a few seconds to get their answers in. Looks like the numbers are still ticking up and coming. Our answers are still coming in. Give folks just another few seconds. All right, let's look at the results. So it looks like the majority of folks at 56% are City of Hudson residents, 12% are commuters, 12% are business owners or store managers, and 51% are other. Okay, and our next question. Do you live within the city limits? Yes or no? Okay, we'll give folks just another couple of seconds. Okay, and it looks like 43% said yes, that they do live within the city limits, and the majority of folks at 57% do not live within the city limits. All right, and we have one more question for poll number 1. Do you feel that truck traffic within the city limits is an issue and that an alternate truck route should be provided? Yes or no? All right, we'll give folks just another few seconds. Okay, let's see. great majority of folks say that they do feel that truck traffic within the city limits is an issue and that an alternate truck route should be provided at 84%, and 16% said no. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew. So now we're going to touch upon the feasibility study objectives. The objectives of the study are to determine the truck travel patterns, which we did earlier, and the impacts of the New York State designated truck route within the city. Identify existing truck traveling through the city versus local deliveries. I know this was touched upon earlier, but we want to re-emphasize that this is regarding through travel, trucks that are entering and leaving the city and not stopping in the city for local deliveries. We want to assess the environmental, physical, and social residents and business effects of truck traffic, and identify and assess alternate truck route options that reduce truck traffic within the city. We also want to identify options for through truck traffic that provide a cost-effective and safer alternate route through the city. So with those objectives, we have some goals of the study. So we wanted to identify preferred alternate routes for the truck traffic that minimize stop and go through truck travel through the city, reduce that through truck travel within the city, and then make sure that the project stakeholders and municipalities surrounding the city and the study area are coordinated for the options that we came up with. Also, some of the goals are to improve the quality of life for the city residents and businesses that reduce the vehicular emissions and noise pollution, provide safer travel for vehicles and pedestrians, and also reduce the impacts to existing infrastructure such as underground utilities that the trucks are running over and having an impact on. And then lastly, we're identifying alternate truck route options that meet the project objectives. So this is the study area. As you can see, it's quite large. The majority of that study area encompasses the town of Claverack, town of Greenport, and of course, the city of Hudson. So we did look at a vast area for this study. The project steps. So there's a long process to get to an actual construction document or at a time where we're actually going to start construction. We are here right now at the planning stages of this process in the feasibility study. So from here, their funding would be acquired for the project, preliminary design and approvals, design approval, and then final design, and eventually construction. That process typically takes years. And just to reiterate some of the process, we've collected and evaluated existing truck traffic through the city, including stakeholder input. We've had a lot of stakeholder input on this, including this meeting, and we will continue to do so until the end of the project. Assess environmental, physical, and social effects of the truck traffic. We're proposing alternative truck route options. We're going to select preferred alternative routes. And then again, we're going to coordinate those alternate routes that we've selected with project stakeholders for their input. And then ultimately, we're going to just determine a feasible alternate truck route with all that input taken into account. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chad Snyder, who's going to walk you through the details of our alternate routes.
Thank you, Brian. At first, we're just going to go over some of the data collection that we performed earlier on in the project that contributed to the development of the data summary report that we presented in the last public presentation. So for this study, the minimum criteria for a truck means it needs to have a double axle. And we're looking at truck classifications from 6 up to 13. So you're looking at your local box delivery trucks all the way up to your tractor trailer or 18-wheeler combos in class 8 and above. The 3 axles carry lighter loads, and the 4 axles typically carry more goods and heavier loads. So the existing truck routes. These are the routes we identified, although trucks do exit the city on some of the other routes as well. So we have right here our existing Route 1. existing Route 2, existing Route 3, traveling from the north under US 9 down towards the bridge. Our existing Route 4 coming down 66 and heading towards the bridge as well. And then also our existing Route 5 going from 23B on the east side down towards the bridge as well. So for the purposes of this study, truck is defined as a vehicle with a minimum of a dual axle and varies in length. Example ranges, like I said before, for box trucks in class 6 to 18-wheelers or tractor trailer combinations that are located in classes 8 and above. The New York State Department of Transportation publishes statewide truck averages for roadway classifications throughout the state. The truck routes in this area are classified as an urban minor arterial or functional class 16. The statewide truck average for data published between 2013 and 2018 was 3.7 in the region that the city of Hudson is located. And those percentages vary throughout the state from 3.6 to 6.2%. The average or the percent trucks on the routes within the city ranged from 1% to 4.7%. We also looked at the crash history, not only with trucks, but with everything. But since this is a truck study, we were focusing on the trucks for most of it. We requested the New York State DOT crash data and reviewed that for the most recent 5-year period. The numbers in blue that you're about to see are the total number of crashes per location. So the largest crash incidents within the city involving trucks were found on the following streets. Again, the blue numbers are the total number of crashes along that segment, and the percentage is the number of accidents involving trucks. So on Green Street, we had 68 accidents with approximately 9% involving trucks. On Columbia Street, we had 50 accidents with approximately 12% involving trucks. And on 3rd Street, we had 46 accidents with approximately 11% involving trucks. So not only did we look at locations within the city, we looked at locations outside the city where our proposed routes were going and the truck accidents along those routes and at those intersections as well. So as you can see here, there are some in a few of the locations on New York State Route 23 and US Route 9. Approximately 9% of 35 accidents involved trucks. On 23B and 9H, we had 13% of 31. And on 66, 9H, we had about 9% of the total 33 accidents at that location as well. And just want to point out that the confined roads and the dense and narrow nature of the roads within the city do make it very difficult for the travel of trucks through the city. There's actually one section that the trucks have to stop to allow passenger vehicles to pass because they cannot pass next to each other. So the harms and risks of trucks in Hudson. So there are some health implications. Diesel exhaust is not a favorable thing. There is particular matter in diesel exhaust that's linked to certain diseases. There are also substances found in diesel exhaust that has the potential to lead to cancer. And any of those risks are also elevated in the younger population as well. Impacts on commercial areas and pedestrians. We already talked about this a little bit with the narrow streets. Has the potential for the trucks to track onto the sidewalks. There's a lot of street furniture in the city that continues to be damaged from the truck traffic. And if there was a pedestrian staying there, they could possibly be impacted as well. Economic impacts, various degradation in the community. may prohibit tourism, and also impacts on the subterranean infrastructure. Vibration of heavy vehicles may damage the subterranean infrastructure, such as water lines, drainage lines, and other utility lines as well. And future repairs to infrastructure will include costly impacts to roads, sidewalks, and properties when those roads have to be dug up to replace those utilities. And again, this data is based on densely populated and developed areas such as the city of Hudson. So the large truck volume summary. So it's important to note that this does not include the Colarusso trucks. The Colarusso truck route was interior to our data collection locations, but we also did collect the number of trucks that were using the South Bay Causeway, so we could quantify that number as well. So we had large truck volumes, 4 more axles. Average weekday truck traffic is what we're reporting here.
It must be lagging for some reason.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So existing truck route 1 has 24 total inbound trips. The large through trucks that would exit the city at any of the other locations is about 47% of that, which is 11 trucks. As we move on to existing route 2, we have a total of 22 inbound large trucks. Approximately 47% of that is 10. These are the numbers of trucks that would be rerouted to the new route. On E3, we have 47 total coming in, with 22 being rerouted. And on existing route 4, we have 84 total inbound trips, with 39 being rerouted. And for existing route 5, we have 15 coming in total large trucks with 4 axles or more. And approximately 47% of that is 7 trucks that would be rerouted to the alternate route. Total large truck volume that would be rerouted is approximately 89 trucks, or 47%, like I said. And it's also important to note, again, that Colarusso trucks are not accounted for in this. The 2 days that we collected data for the South Bay Causeway on a Wednesday and Thursday had 59 trucks and 84 trucks using that route. With historic data from 2019, with the truck route volumes ranging anywhere from 20 trucks to 90 trucks during the course of one day. At this point, I will turn it back over to Brian.
Thank you. So we want to talk about our results of our online survey number 1. This information is posted to the website and also available in the draft summary report that's on the website. So the objective of this survey was to solicit opinion on the effect of daily truck traffic within the life within the city of Hudson. So some of the comments came back. We had a lot of good feedback. We had 329 responses, as the mayor pointed out earlier. And I'm just going to go through and pop a few of these up. I'm not going to read each one, but the flavor, a lot of good inputs about safety, enjoyment of pedestrians. The trucks are deterring business patrons. Presence of trucks takes away from the walking experience in the city. A couple more that came up: congestion, traffic in the narrow streets, again, are issues pointed out in the survey. And again, another thing with congestion. So there's 329 responses. We only picked a few. These were kind of like the flavor of the summary of the online survey. If you're interested in more information, you can certainly go to that survey and look at that. Conversely, there were some people that were for the trucks. So some of those comments are here. They benefit the city. Your food, gas, clothing, and almost everything else comes by truck. Trucks are operated by local regional companies who employ many of your neighbors. And trucks bring needed supplies to the neighborhood and jobs to the area. And we agree with that. And that's why we're looking at through trucks only and not eliminating deliveries to the city. So with that, we're going to go with our audience poll number 2. So Andrew, do you want to take that away?
Sure thing. All right, so the first question, what are the most important considerations when selecting an alternate truck route option? Is it cost, shortest distance or time, keeping routes away from residential areas, or environment, health, and safety? All right, we'll give folks just another few seconds. Couple still coming in. All right. So it looks like the majority of folks selected keeping routes away from residential areas at 76%, cost at 2%, and the environment, health, and safety at 22%. 0 for shortest distance or time. All right. Next question. Would the time it takes to provide funding and construction of an alternate truck route factor into your decision? Yes or no? All right, we'll give folks just a couple more seconds. Okay, so 29% said yes and 71% said no.
Okay.
Next question. Oh, actually, that
was the last one. Yep.
was the last one. Yep. All right.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
thank
you,
you,
everyone.
Andrew. So as part of the project, we wanted to make sure we coordinated with the general public as well as municipalities, governing agencies, local businesses, and property owners. And we also did meet and present the project to business and property owners with direct impact by the proposed routes, whether it was through their existing property or affected them in some other direct way. Some of the stakeholders were the City of Hudson and Columbia County, New York State Department of Transportation in both Region 8 and the main office here up in Albany. The local municipalities, including the towns of Claverack and Greenport. And as I mentioned, the local businesses and also the local property owners. And we received feedback from them as well on the alternate routes. So the types of routes that we looked at and the types of options that were considered were the no-build option. Well, what if we just kept things the way they are? What would happen? Well, that really wouldn't meet the project goals very well. So that was one of the options we looked at. The other one was the no-build with improvements. What if we use the existing route and improve it to be able to accommodate the trucks? That would include improving the existing route to current design standards, which also presents some challenges given the densely developed nature of the city. And then the alternate truck routes. Again, we looked at the alternate truck routes for through truck traffic, as we've mentioned. And initially we looked at 12 routes and then narrowed those down to 5 preferred routes. So we looked at some environmental considerations as well. The following resources were considered when developing the alternate truck routes. You know, where were the wetlands, water bodies, and the floodplains in the area, the general ecology and wildlife in the area, as well as historic properties, any cultural resources, landmarks, parklands, and farmlands. Visual resources were also considered, as well as air quality, noise, and energy. And we also looked at where schools were, recreational areas, and also places of worship when developing the alternate routes. So the 12 alternate routes that we looked at, we'll show here. So this is option 1A. Option 1B is very similar. And then we go into option 2 is here. located here. Option 3. Option 4 has some new alignment, is almost solely on new alignment roadways. Option 5 used some of the existing route in addition to some existing roads. Option 6 used combination of existing roads and a short new alignment. Option 7 had some new alignment roadways as well, as did option 8 and 9. Option 10 used existing roadways entirely. Option 11 all had I believe had a short new roadway on it as well. And option 12 utilized existing roadways. So from these 12 options, we used the sources that we mentioned earlier and also the project goals and objectives to narrow them down. And the options that were dismissed out of the 12 were option 2, option 4, option 5, option 7, option 8, option 9, option 10, and option 11. Now, there were many different reasons why each one of these was dismissed, and all of that is included in our report on the city website if you would like more detail. So from there, we've looked at the preferred options. The preferred is defined as an alternate truck route option that partially or completely meets the project needs and goals and was determined to be warranted for further study in future design study phases. Option 1A, and we'll go into these options in a little more detail in the following slides as well. Option 1B, option 3, option 6, and option 12. So option 1A. Option 1A uses the roadways listed here. The range in route length, depending on where you enter the city or start on the truck route versus your destination, ranges anywhere from 5.1 to 9.4 miles. And the estimated route travel time is anywhere from a little over 10 minutes to almost 17 and a half minutes, depending on which route you're taking. Now, we understand that some of these roads along these routes are not up to standard in order to handle truck traffic. So as part of our study, we looked at roadway improvements that were required to these roads. So with this option, Merle Avenue needed to be improved. It was a very narrow road. The pavement's not in very good condition, so it would need to be widened and redone. Lone Star Road is an existing dirt/gravel road that would have to be constructed to the standards required for a truck route. Spook Rock Road is a bit narrow in some places. That would also need to be improved as well and widened. Hiscox Road is the same as Spook Rock. It's a very narrow road that would need to be improved in width, and also Fingar Road as well. So Fingar Road runs down here for those of you who can see my mouse, and the intersection of Hiscox and Fingar Road would have to be reconstructed as well, given the alignment of that intersection. So all of those improvements, we came up with an opinion of probable cost of around $7 million in today's dollars. Moving on to option 1B, which is very similar to option 1A, with the exception of we do not use Hiscox and Fingar Road. We continue down on Spook Rock Road all the way down to New York Route 23. The total range of route length here is 5.1 to 12.9 miles. And the route travel time is a little bit longer than the previous one at a little over 11 minutes to almost 21 and a half minutes. The roadway improvements required for this one, again, same on Merle Avenue, Lone Star Road, and Spook Rock Road. And the cost associated with this option is around $7.9 million. And that increase is due to the increase in length along Spook Rock Road compared to the length along Hiscox and Fingar Road. Moving on to option 3. This uses US Route 9. This also has a new roadway alignment from US Route 9 to connect to New York Route 9H. That would also require the construction of 3 structures to go over creeks or other water bodies. That would include either a bridge or a culvert constructed in those locations. Here, the total range of route length is about 5.2 to 14 miles, with the route travel time a little over 8 minutes to almost 19 minutes. The roadway improvements required here would be the construction of the new road from US Route 9 to 9H up at the top. And there are, as I mentioned, 3 structures that would be required to pass over creeks and other water courses as well. And the opinion probable cost for this one is just short of $26 million, mainly due to the construction of the bridges and culverts. Option 6. Option 6 also has a new alignment roadway coming off of Newman Road, connecting over to Route 9, just north of the Colarusso quarry. The total range of route length here is 5.6 to 9 miles, with the total range of travel times from 10.5 to almost 17.5 minutes. Again, we looked at roadway improvements for this one as well. Those roadway improvements require widening on Newman Road, as well as the new roadway segment that I mentioned that connects Newman Road to US Route 9. And there would need to be improvements at the intersections on Route 9 as well. The opinion probable cost for this one is a little over $3 million. Option 12. This option uses all existing roads, US Route 9, Healy, 66, Fish and Game Road, as well as other New York routes, 9H, 23B, and Route 23. The route length ranges from 6 to almost 15 miles, with the route travel time a little over 10 minutes to almost 24 minutes, depending on your origin and destination. This one also did include some improvements as well to Fish and Game Road for widening to the current standards for a truck route. And those improvements would cost in the range of $1.4 million. So moving on, this is a summary of all of the information that we just went over for comparison purposes. The minimum lengths are all pretty close to each other. The maximum lengths, depending on your route, range anywhere from 9 to almost 15 miles, with the minimum travel times from 8 to 11 minutes range, and from 17 to almost 24 minutes. They have varying ranges of roadway improvements that would be required, as well as the costs. The largest cost is for option 3, while the lowest cost would be for option 12. At this point, I will turn it over to Andrew for our third and final poll of the evening.
And actually, Chad, if you want, you can keep the slide on the summary. It might be helpful for people as they take the poll.
Good point.
So for our next question, do you support the need to find an alternate truck route for truck traffic traveling through the city limits? All right, looks like we have just about everybody in. And 90% said yes, they do support the need to find an alternate truck route through the city limits, and 10% said no. Okay, so moving on to our next question. Select your first, there we go. Select your first choice for an alternate truck route option. Option 1A, 1B, option 3, option 6, or option 12. Okay, we'll give folks just another few seconds. All right, looks like we have most people in. And for the selection for first choice, the winner here is option 12 at 41%, followed by option 6 at 24%, then option 3 at 22%, 1A at 10%, and 1B at 4%. Okay, select your second choice for an alternate truck route option. Option 1A, 1B, option 3, option 6, or option 12. Okay, we'll give folks just another couple of seconds. All right, so let's see what the results are. And it looks like the winner for second choice for an alternate truck route is option 6 at 27%, followed by option 3 at 24%, option 12 at 22%, option 1A at 14%, and option 1B at 12%. And finally, select your third choice for an alternate truck route option. Option 1A, 1B, 3, 6, or 12. Okay, so we'll give folks just another few seconds. Okay. And the winner for third choice is option 3 at 33%, followed by option 6, 22%, then option 12 at 18%, option 1B at 16%, and option 1A at 11%. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So that was kind of a loaded question because we're going to get into our online summary number 2, which had asked those same questions, and we have those results here. So we wanted to kind of compare those results with the live survey you just took. So for this survey, we wanted your opinion regarding alternate truck route options that are being considered, and specifically to those that don't have a destination within the city of Hudson. We had 276 responses, so quite a good turnout for that. First choice, option 12. First choice in the live poll was option 12. Second choice in the survey was option 3. Second choice in the live poll we just took was option 6. And the third choice in the summary, online summary, was 1B. And the third choice on the live poll was option 3. So 12 and 3 seemed to be there, and then 6 was added in. So it's good to know that we're kind of consistent with our choices based on the information provided. So we're in an online survey number 2, where just this graph kind of gives you an idea of where the choices were. So the green, blue, and yellow tell you, show you what was chosen and how, and the percentages associated with that. And so what fueled these choices? Well, utilization of state routes was one. Avoidance of residential areas is another, which was a question earlier. And then, cost of improvements was another factor. So we had asked the question in this: does the cost of improvements influence your decision? 40% said somewhat important, 21% said not important or need more information, and 18 said very important. So cost seems to be a factor in decision making. Of all the summaries that we prepared and produced, and we asked the question, did we hit the mark, or is there other options that we should be looking at? 90% of participants were satisfied with the options selected for further analysis. Some of the common suggestions from the public for other consideration were to avoid 23B where Claverack is residential, consider additional new roads to avoid residences, and trucks frequently use 9 to Healy to 66 to 9H. So what are the next steps for this study? So we've gone through public meeting number 1, public meeting number 2. We've gotten online survey number 1 completed and online survey number 2. And with that, all that information, with tonight's information and the next week's receiving of comments, we're going to review all those comments, and then we're going to recommend a feasible truck alternative route with the city based on all that input and all the factors that are associated with that. The final step would be to put all that information and those results into the final truck study report, which would be uploaded to the project website on the city site, so everybody can take a look at that. Continuing with some more next steps, like I said, this is the website that this information is available. And the information that is currently there is everything on this list: the data summary report, online summary number 1, public meeting number 1, the draft truck study report, online survey number 2, I believe is on there. If it is not, it will be by tomorrow. And this presentation, along with the recording of this meeting, will be on there as well. And finally, at the end, when we're done, we're going to post the final truck study reports. So we're going to, as we gear up to the question and answer portion of the meeting, Andrew, can you just go through this again for everybody?
Absolutely. Yep. So again, if you'd like to provide us with a question or comment, there are 2 ways to do that. You can either post a question in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom webinar panel, or you can use the raise hand feature, and you can tell us. I'll unmute you, and you can go ahead and tell us your question or comment. If you're calling in via telephone, you can use *9 to raise your hand or *6 to unmute. And then again, following the meeting, if we are continuing to accept comments, you can send questions or comments to HudsonTruckStudy@gmail.com, and we will accept comments up until May 4th. So if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to add, please send them to us. And as Brian had mentioned, a recording of the webinar and a copy of the presentation will be available on the city website at the link below. I will mention that we're scheduled this evening to go to 7:30. So if there's a lot of questions still at that point that we haven't gotten to, if we don't get to everyone, we will, again, you can post them to the project email, and we will also be recording the questions and comments in the Q&A function, and posting responses to any of the ones we don't get to on the project website as well. So with that, we can go ahead and jump into the Q&A. So we do have a couple of people with their hands raised. So I'm going to go ahead. Mary Susan Naus, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My first question was actually to the city. The vehicle and traffic law says that a city or municipality may have a truck route, but it doesn't require you to have one. I'm just hoping we've gone through the basics. There's also a section 20 that says, while you don't have to have a truck route, you do have the power to exclude trucks on any routes you choose. So I'm very interested this evening to hear M&J's report, but I wanted to back up just a little bit, which was to say, has the city gone back to the authorizing legislation and determined that they're working the right end of the problem? And then my just real point and shoot question to MJ, which is a lot of your alternate routes included going down 23 and 9 to loop through Bell's Pond and then head back north. I live in the town of Livingston, and that's the northern end of our town. That's a sensitive area with our own development plans at the moment. It probably could use a traffic circle. I think that's important. My one question was, in your cost projections, when you have out of, I guess, 4 of the options that I saw out of the 12, at least 4 came down to Bell's Pond and then jackknifed to go north again. Did your plans include the cost to put a traffic circle or redo the traffic intersection at that location? So one question for the city and then one cost question to MJ.
And do you want me to field the first one?
Sure, go ahead.
So my understanding of the way the state law works in the truck route is that the city on its own accord. The city does not have the power to remove where trucks enter and where trucks exit the city on those truck routes. In essence, those are shared with our neighbors, and so we can't just change those on our own. But what we can't
offline, but according to the statute, no, it has nothing.
Okay, so let me finish.
To do with your neighbors.
Mary, let me finish, please. So one thing the power that we do have is that we could, as the city, we could change where the route runs through the city. So we could, instead of having it go on Columbia Street, we could choose a different street within the city. But we can't just say the truck route no longer exists at all in the city, and that's my understanding with conversations with DOT. That by fiat we have to get agreement from the DOT to just remove altogether the truck route out of the city entirely outside of our boundaries. So that was sort of the point of this study, is to come up with some alternate routes that DOT would approve.
We'll talk offline. I used to work for the DOT.
Okay. All right. Well, that'd be really helpful to have then.
Second question regarding the intersection improvements. We did look at improvements, and Chad, you can jump in. We did not look at a traffic circle at this juncture, just not to say that it wouldn't be looked at further in the future design phases. But we did, if there's any turning movements or traffic related signal wise, we did look at the costs associated with that and what improvements would be needed for that intersection, I believe, along that route.
Yes, that's correct.
So no, just turning movements. Thank you.
Just turning movements, no circle. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And we have another person with their hand raised, Jonah Beaucaire, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing that. Oh, there we go. They're no longer there. Okay, so we'll go ahead to some of our, oh, are you there, Jonah? Okay, we'll go to some of our written comments right now. First couple are from Mary, who we just spoke with. Jakes says, you mentioned exhaust health implications. What about the health implications of the loads themselves? For example, gravel trucks. Thank you. Another comment from Ives. The gravel dust and larger particulate matter from the trucks is an issue to pedestrians, drivers, homeowners, and renters, coast property, houses, and lungs.
Agreed.
Yep. Another question from Ives. Did you consider as an option better enforcement of current routes? We frequently see trucks on non-truck roads.
I guess I would say that was just sort of outside the scope of the project. So I think that's certainly something that I've heard from other people, and it's something to consider. But I think ultimately the goal of the project was to identifying truck traffic that doesn't have an origin or a destination in Hudson, and identify an alternate route for it to go on. And so that sort of question around enforcement wouldn't address this specific challenge for this study.
Okay, this next question, this was from Mary Nouse. This might be, you may have answered it already. Do the cost projections include a traffic circle at 9 and 23 Bell's Pond?
Yes, we just answered that. Yeah.
Okay. A comment from Mary Luft. Mary Luft. We in the hamlet of Claverack are greatly impacted by truck traffic at least as much as any resident of Hudson. Many of us live on 23B and 9H and have trucks constantly barreling past our homes, spewing black soot, noise pollution, and serious danger to our lives and properties. Speed limit reduction would be key to alleviating this problem. Hudson speed limit is 30. Through Claverack, the speed limit is 40 miles per hour. Traffic, trucks, as well as other vehicles regularly pushes this limit well over the 5 mile per hour legal margin. We need the speed limit through our hamlet to be reduced to 30 miles per hour, just as it is through Hudson. I appeal to you to consider this in your recommendations. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Let's go. We have a couple of hands raised, and it looks like Jonah is back with us. Jonah, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. Just a very appreciative, very diplomatic comment. I'm enthusiastic to see the diversity of voices at the table and the incredible sets of experience that are at the table. So I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity, and all those who are moderating and participating in the Q&A, and also involved at the level of fostering the conversation and its various kinds of feasibility. So I'm really more on the participation front. But one thing that I'm noticing as well is I'm sort of humbled to see the experience sets that are at the table and convening around the issue. I think one thing that what I'm hearing, in fact, kind of on the economic development front or more of a treasury front, is Michael's comment seems to me kind of deeply gubernatorial. He knows that the city of Hudson can't just act alone. So I know that the spirit of this Zoom is polling a lot of input and taking a lot of participation, which I'm very interested in. And then for our moderator, who sounds incredibly thoughtful, what I put in the chat was the notion that perhaps the arts, and I would also maybe add economic development, that they're not separate from the truck route. And very often they're on the truck route, or when I look at all the options moving forward, we've got the arts on other versions of the truck route. So they'll probably always be in the mix. And to say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jonah.
Thank you, Jonah.
All right, so our next person with their hand up is Stephanie Meismer. Stephanie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, it's actually Willie Meismer. That's okay. I guess logged in through my wife's Gmail, but that's fine. Who cares? Same difference. Anyways, thank you to everybody. My question are twofold for the city. What steps have been taken thus far or are in place in terms of communicating these proposed routes to nearby communities, knowing that we'll need buy-in from them to some extent or to the full extent? And so that's one part of the question. Then the second part of the question is, you broke out some costs. What's the plan, if there is such a plan as yet, to raise money to pay for these proposed new routes? And is there a timeline for that you can shed light on at this point? Thank you to everybody.
Yeah, these are great questions, Willie. I appreciate that. So what steps? We had reached out to some of the key stakeholders as part of this process. So we showed the routes to the neighboring town supervisors, shared them with the county's engineering and highway department, and then reached out to all of some of the routes would include like the need to acquire sort of a section of people's property to run a new road through. So any of the properties that were included on those specific routes, we reached out to those property owners. And then the surveys were open to everybody, and they were, not only advertised in the City of Hudson website, but they're also in the Register Star. So there was some opportunity to get feedback from outside of Hudson. But I think your point is well taken that there certainly needs to be a lot more of that. And I think if you look at the survey data and the attendance here, is that most of the participation so far is from Hudson residents, and Hudson residents are likely to have sort of a different take on this project than our neighbors. And so I think there certainly needs to be a lot more engagement with the neighboring towns, particularly like the residents and businesses along those alternate routes. So those are good things to be thinking about moving forward. And then in terms of the funding angle, there's not a specific funding plan. I mean, I think that the DOT certainly spend, every year sort of releases money for major road construction projects. And so that would sort of be like the main thing that we'd be looking at, is that once we had the support from our neighbors, like that would be the way to sort of move forward, to sort of look at some of those DOT funds. And I'm not sure if MJ Engineering might be able to sort of add more about how some of those funding cycles work.
Yeah, I'll just add that those are cycles, and they're not always available every year. Some cycles are 2 or 3 years in. Some of the TAP CMAQ funding is sporadic, and it's based on, the COVID pandemic delayed the last round by 1 year for some of the funding. So we've identified a number of funding sources potentially for the type of work in the report, and I think those are things that going forward that needs to be looked at to figure out what's available, what can apply to this project, and how can we get that. So those are certainly the next step type thing after we get through this initial process.
And I think that also affects not all the plans have the same price tag. And so there certainly is a potential barrier for some of the more expensive alternates that could make it that much harder to identify the funding for. Although maybe if there's other advantages to it, that outweighs that, there are other challenges besides money. So that's certainly one of the factors.
Okay, so moving on to our next person with their hand up, John Bradley, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I'm concerned about some of the costs on residential communities of having a large volume of truck traffic. I'm certainly sympathetic to the residents of Hudson who would like to alleviate that cost. But I noticed that some of the alternatives, especially 12, would reroute most of this truck traffic through the hamlet of Claverick. So you're transferring these costs that are now imposed on Hudson residents to the residents of the Claverick hamlet. And the hamlet has been struggling for years to try to make it a more livable, more pedestrian community. So I just want to register that you should also take into consideration these costs that you're transferring from Hudson to other communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Okay, so moving on to Marsha Wells. Marsha, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is we're here together, David Wells and Marsha Wells. Newman Road looks interesting. There's a lot of Colarusso trucks going through it, and of course it's the Columbia Waste. But except for the Polish sports club, there doesn't seem to be a lot of residences through there. And so I'm wondering what's the negatives of that number 6?
It's hard to say because the opinion of the public, obviously, I can't see what those opinions are. One of the challenges with Newman Road is the profile and grades for that road that undulates pretty heavily up and down and in turns, so that construction cost is fairly heavy there to try to smooth that out and then make that viable for a truck traffic, lane width-wise, shoulder width-wise, drainage, the whole nine that comes along with that. So, although it's a fairly short, I guess, in comparison to the other routes, that road is probably the most challenging as far as getting that up to speed to accompany truck traffic.
Okay. All right, moving on, we have William Meismer again. William, you can go ahead and unmute.
All right, thank you. Just building off of some of the answers to the question, and thank you for that, Michael. So are there ways for the public to help gather support from nearby communities and get involved in that effort in any way? And if so, what are they, and when might we be able to learn more about that effort? And then two, in terms of securing funding and like developing a plan or, you know, activating around that, are there ways for the public to get involved in a substantive way, or is this just something that, and then is this like are we thinking that that funding is more like a Hail Mary or more like something we feel is realistically achievable for some of the cost numbers that were presented? So yeah, can we get involved in gathering support and, you know, getting together a plan for funding? And do you have a hopeful attitude about the numbers that you're looking at that these guys are presenting? Thank you.
I have some ideas, but maybe I'm gonna ask MJ first. You know, you've done these kind of work in other communities, and what's your advice for Hudson and for Columbia County in terms of both outreach and funding?
Well, I think from our experience, you know, so getting everybody on board with an option is number one. Further studies. Sometimes funding is great up front, but sometimes there's other studies that need to happen to solidify those numbers and that funding effort. I think it's a great idea to get public involved in any way they can. You know, talking to your congressman, talking to the people that run D.D. Barrett, you know, the people that can secure these funds, getting that in front of them, member items, that kind of thing helps out with the knowledge of, hey, this is an issue. And I know that they know that, but public support, in my belief, is always a good thing from their perspective as being a constituent for the people.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess I would add on to that in terms of public outreach. You know, I mean, ultimately, the city can do some direction, but ultimately, you know, I think like the best campaigns have a grassroots element that's, you know, that's above and beyond whatever the official government is doing. But I also think maybe as a starting point is that there's some people on this call who have expressed concerns about, you know, who don't live in Hudson and have expressed concerns about either the existing truck traffic in their neighborhoods or that the added truck traffic. So in some ways, like that might be a good place to start, is like people who are already showing up here and expressing concerns, like what is it that we can do together to either to build those bonds or sort of address some of those issues. And so, you know, maybe that's the beginning part, and it's, you know, reaching out to people that, you know, in those neighboring towns, or finding people and having those conversations. And so certainly that needs to happen. I think added onto the funding piece, it's, you know, like I've never gotten funding for an alternate truck route. So like, I can't really speak with a lot of expertise about how likely we are to get the funding. But I think a pretty key thing will be getting support. I think it'll be very difficult to get the funding if we don't get the support from our neighbors, because then we're essentially asking the state or the federal government to sort of pick one constituency over another. And I think that's going to be a harder funding sell than if it's sort of like a win-win for everybody. So I think it's going to still go back to sort of building a grassroots consensus. And so some of that is getting people to agree with us who are outside of Hudson, and some of that is going back to the facts of the issue, and that like right now they are routed through the densest parts of the county, and it's not necessarily the best traveling ways for trucks on sort of narrow streets with sewage and water infrastructure underneath the street and those kinds of things. And so if we can find other alternatives that still makes sense, and you know, both from a justice issue and also an economic development issue, that's gonna bring in other sources of revenue if we move those truck route out of Hudson. And so how do we build a coalition around that? And so anything that you can do to help, I think is really appreciated, and everyone on this call.
All right. So moving on to Stephen King. Stephen, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm speaking for the Claverick Hamlet again, and I'm not quite clear as to why the Colarusso trucks were left out of the study. I'd have to know that better. I object to that because any of these ideas, any additional truck traffic on 23B, for example, is already on top of a fairly heavy amount of Colarusso trucks. So I'd like to understand why that was and if that cannot be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, I'll let Chad take that one. The Colarusso trucks were included. I think the wording that he mentioned earlier was a little misleading, so I'll let him explain that away.
Yeah. The Colarusso trucks were part of the study, and we did account for those, like Brian had said. They weren't included in the origin destination data collection because of the location of our data collection locations, which is why we set up a video camera on the South Bay Causeway to be able to account for the number of trucks using their route. Their route today goes through the city and then down 9G 23B to the South Bay Causeway, and then they loop back up through the city, back down Columbia and back out. So those are taken into consideration. And yes, those trucks are anticipated to use the alternate routes as well in order to remove those trucks out of the city.
I guess I would also
to the through trucks. Sorry, Michael.
I was just going to add that there's when we're talking about the city of Hudson Colarusso trucks, there's trucks from this one company to the docks, but there's like the company has trucks that also don't have a destination in the docks. So there's also might be some confusion around like Colarusso has trucks that go north and south that like aren't headed towards Hudson, don't necessarily go through Hudson. So there's also like there's a whole nother realm of like, if you're talking about Colarusso, around trucks that aren't necessarily part of the Hudson study.
Yes, and those would also use the alternate routes as well.
Okay.
But I think also one of the things that you're going to have in the report, right, is also to be able to show with each route how the number of trucks that the report has, like the number of trucks that it would add to sort of the additional road, right?
Correct.
So that also might help for like the Claverick residents, for example, is that there'll be sort of like an estimate number of this is the total number of trucks we're talking about.
All right, so moving on to Laura Margolis. Laura, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. To widen the roads, and there are several roads that were mentioned that would have to be widened, depending on which route we're referring to. To widen the roads where there are homes, will eminent domain be enforced? I mean, how do you do that? Because it seems to me to widen some of those roads, you would need to encroach on people's private property. How is that handled?
I'll take that, Chad, and you can jump in. Typically, it depends on where the road is and the condition of the existing road. So I think it was the Lone Star Road was gravel, and it doesn't have a road structure. That's one condition. Another one is that it's got an existing road, but it's small or in bad shape, no shoulders. So different scenarios and different situations. Typically, the word eminent domain is really a last stitch effort. When we go through this process, not for this project, but for any other project that we're taking property, we always try to minimize those takings. So the alignment of the road can be shifted. Things can be done to minimize those takings. If there are takings, the first step is try to work with the property owner to see if they're willing sellers, give them the information and provide that information to them so they can see what that means. Of course, there's a process that tells them what that fair market value is for that. Lastly, if that fails and there's no negotiation and there has to be some taking for some very good reasons, eminent domain comes into play. But again, I don't think this study is not at that point. That's for future design studies and pieces. But this considers that. And that's why we've kind of identified those roads that need to be upgraded for each option. So when selecting an option, you can kind of weigh those into your consideration.
Yes, but not all the roads that have been mentioned that would have to be widened are gravel or in bad shape. Some
That's
of them
correct.
are just not wide enough, and some of these are country roads, and they have their own sewage. What are those called?
Drainage.
Drainage. What?
Yep. Drainage ditches and
everything. The ending place is right there at the road. I mean, this just seems really complicated and maybe contentious.
There's a lot to it. And like I said, we're at the beginning stages of that. So we're just identifying the big picture at this point. We're not diving into the weeds as far as, I need to take 3 foot of your property. That's not for this study. But yes, your mention of other domino effects of widening roads, utilities, drainage, ditches, that's all was taken into account based on our field investigations. If you're widening the road and there's a ditch there, you have to move the ditch. And if you have to move the ditch, how does that impact the adjacent property owner, and how does that impact where that ends up in outlets? So yes.
I think that one of my points is that that I think should be considered is time, and so I don't maybe if there's a further questionnaire, it could include a time frame, because the more contentious the choice, the longer this is going to take.
Yeah.
So that would be one of my questions. What in general, how long do these things take to come to some kind of an agreement?
Very good question. And I think we did have a poll question or some question earlier that had mentioned time factor with the process and how much that weighed into your decision. I think that was the second poll question we had.
Okay.
I don't have a specific answer for your time frame. I will say, and I said this before to the same question, definitely in the years category. I can't tell you if it's 2 or 5. That depends on a lot of things. One is the funding for the project. And then of course, as you get into the funding and then move forward through design, it's the environmental justice and permitting phase and all that good stuff. So that alone takes 2 to 3 years if you had the funding and you're moving forward. So I would say 3 to 5 years for that, and then whatever that takes for the funding or the maximum kind of time frame for that. So hopefully that gives you a time frame question and answer.
Thank you.
All right, so we do have quite a few questions in the Q&A so I'm just going to read through some of those real quick. From Sarah Van Buren. Hi there, thanks for all the information. Appreciate how thorough this has been thus far and your willingness to listen to the community. I wanted to know, do you have a general idea of where the new extension roads would be built if we were to go with option 3? Would be great to know before submitting my final comments. Thank you.
I'll take a stab at that. Yes, we do know where we've laid that out in the report. There is a map that shows where those go. Those are one of the areas that we did send out letters and information to the property owners of that segment to let them know that that was something we were looking at as an option. And we did talk to a few of those property owners, but you can get the idea of where that is located from the report itself. There's a blow up picture or figure. I think it's whatever figure it is, but option 3, you can see where those are lining up.
Yeah, and just to add to what Brian said, we did consider, property lines and areas on there. So we did position that accordingly to reduce the impact to those properties as much as possible.
Okay, so next question is from Doreen Weir. Are there any options to minimize truck traffic through the village of Kinderhook?
I don't believe so. Not in this study. We did not look at Kinderhook as a rerouting option. Just the city of Hudson.
Okay. Keith Kanaga asked, as I understand your presentation, a minority of trucks would be rerouted. Are there any specific local destinations which help explain this, such as ADM, Greenport Transfer Station, excluding Colorado?
Yes, there are a few, as we found with the origin destination study. There were a lot that entered into the city and left the city at the same locations. That's a lot of the trucks that end up coming in. One is the warehouse on the western side of the city near the South Bay Causeway. The other one is the prison off of Route 9, as well as some of the other ones that you had mentioned here. Those are some of the likely destinations of those trucks that do enter and exit the city at the same location, which leads to those smaller numbers of actual through trucks through the city without a destination.
Okay, another question from Keith. What are the current minimum and maximum travel times so we can compare with your proposals?
The minimum and maximum travel times were shown in this presentation, which will be posted to the city website, but that information did come from a table in the report. There's a section in there which identifies that information, so you can look there to get that information.
And it also compares to the existing route as well, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe we've answered that. From Carol McCraney, in reference to my home and homes on Allen Street, understanding the routes discussed are to divert trucks out of the city. The tremendous vibrating heavy pounding of big trucks going down 3rd into rural highway are destroying old home foundations, etc. Please address. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. From Jason Forrester, what variables drove the analysis to include 23B and Claverick to be included in every one of the preferred truck route options? Without having considered any non-23B Claverick options, it raises the question of why this part of 23B couldn't have been excluded from at least one preferred truck route option. This is a heavily residential area.
You can take that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, 23B is a New York route, which does provide travel for and the roadways designed for these types of trucks. So the amount of trucks that are on there today will continue to be on there for that reason. And any of the trucks using it today will use it tomorrow. A lot of our options, we did consider the hamlet was there, and the main routes were designed to avoid that hamlet. But the existing trucks that do use 23B today through Claverack will continue to use it in the future as well.
Okay. From Anonymous, have any of the property owners on Finger, Hiscox, Spook Rock, and Newman Roads been approached about their property being bought for a new truck route?
Those properties were not approached specifically because any property acquisition for those are anticipated to be minor strip takings along their frontage, not requiring their entire property. We did, like I said earlier, we did coordinate and contact the people that we were taking major portions of property from. Again, that's all, if this goes forward or when it goes forward, those are certainly items that need to happen and will take place in the future studies.
And just to add to what Brian said, the intersection of Fingar and Hiscox is owned in the area that would be required to redo that intersection is owned by Colarusso. And they were also talked to about those options as well.
Okay, so we'll go back to some of the raised hands. And I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Yves Jakes, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello, thanks. So I really want to reiterate some of the comments that other people have made, that it's not just a Hudson problem, it's a Columbia County problem. We've got challenges in close by communities like Greenport and Claverick, and it's really important that anything we do addresses not just Hudson, but the adjacent communities. So it's not just about truck routes. We're talking about things like speed limits. We're talking about use of air brakes and horns. And I think all of those issues need to be really brought strongly into any kind of final resolution of the issue.
Especially with regards to pollution and people who have farms, people who have houses, gardens, people who want to walk along the streets and not be disrupted by like really loud trucks. That has to be part of the issue.
Yes, we just hope that, you know, it's more than a route. It's also about the whole set of regulations about how people use those routes.
Even in Claverick, like the fact that there's a bedroom community along those routes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to back to Marsha Wells. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
This is David again. Congress at the moment is considering a massive infrastructure bill. And we have a very talented congressman with Antonio Delgado. And earmarks will be coming on that bill. And I'm wondering if the cost of this has been brought to his office attention.
I haven't spoken to him specifically about this project. I mean, at this point, it just seems too early to fund since we haven't sort of named what the routes are. But I certainly think that that's his office would certainly be a good stop to talking about this. I appreciate the note.
I would suggest you contact him because there's a very good staff people that'll take that information and keep it with them. And it's better to raise it with them now rather than waiting, 2 years when we really start to need the money. That's all. And I would urge people to reach his office, and the fact that there may be some money from the federal government.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Laura Margolis, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Actually, I already asked my question, but since you called on me, I'll just ask quickly. A person, an anonymous person, asked about the property owners on Finger and Spook Rock and Newman, etc. And the answer in some way said that Colarusso owns the intersection. I guess I don't understand that as an answer, or at least a partial answer, because Colarusso doesn't own the homes on those roads. So this isn't a criticism. I just don't understand how Colarusso owning the intersection. I didn't understand that.
We'll clarify that for you. What Chad meant was the property adjacent to the road at that intersection is owned by Colarusso. They don't own the intersection or the roads, but they own the property adjacent to that intersection. So
How does that help the property owners on those roads?
Because where we looked at realigning that intersection was on their property, not on any other properties.
But you'd still be widening those roads.
Yes, for other parts of the road, we were talking about when we mentioned that comment specific to the intersection realignment. Yes, that still holds true for the widening of the road above and beyond that intersection.
Right, and that's what the person asked you, was about the road, not the intersection. But okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so back to the Q&A. Another one from Ives. We want to add that we think that the gravel port for Colarusso is inappropriate for Hudson, should be eliminated. Trucks from Colarusso need to find a new port. Hudson is a small town with many residents who walk and who need clean, fresh air. It is also surrounded by beautiful nature and wetlands. I think Colarusso needs to find a port somewhere else. Also, who is enforcing what trucks enter the city?
The enforcement part, I'll just hit upon in discussions with the DOT. The enforcement's really local enforcement along with proper truck route signage, whether it's local truck deliveries only signage or actually the truck route. That signage, when a new route is finally selected, that signage is going to have to change and be revised to accommodate that route. So a combination of the signage and local enforcement is how that's going to be enforced or anticipated to be enforced.
We have one from Ian Nishke. It seems that the alternative that uses Newman Road is best. Can you elaborate on that option? What is needed if this is to work?
That's 6.
Yeah, that's 6. It's the, yeah, I can answer that one. The new road would be from Newman Road to US Route 9 on the north end of the Colarusso quarry. That would be a new alignment roadway that would connect the two in order to stay away from the city residential areas and things like that. And Newman Road would also need to be updated with wider road as well.
Donna Streets, I have a concern that your live poll did not comment on residential impacts inside or outside the city for each of the 5 options and did not provide a none option for second or third choice. I think this would have impacted the results. Okay, thank you. Okay. Mary now asked, is a traffic simulation planned?
A traffic simulation is not planned for this study, but could be for future development of this project.
Okay. From Anonymous, here, I live just off of 23B and only heard about this from a friend this evening. You need to reach out to locals in Greenport. Do the folks on Fingar Road or Hiscox Road know about this? Thank you.
Yeah, point taken.
Yep. From Christina Bolt, is Spook Rock Road being considered as a recreational area? The creek is a popular swimming and fishing spot for locals. Kids often ride their bikes from the city to Spook Rock.
Is it considered being a recreation as far as, well, it's a roadway. I understand your question as far as there's other optical things happen outside or along that roadway. I think that should definitely be taken into consideration if that option is chosen going forward. For sure, we want to make sure it's safe.
All right, from Anonymous, the clearance between bedrooms and truck bed on Columbia Street and on Columbia Street and 3rd Street are much closer than any other potential truck route mentioned. This makes the change imperative in terms of immediate and ongoing health impacts. Whatever makes the change happen quickly and brings rapid health relief to the people impacted should be pursued. Thank you. Mary Luft, we live on 23B and no one ever reached out to us or our neighbors. Our town supervisor never asked us for our input. Okay. Anonymous asked, has any health impact study been done in terms of fumes and particulate capture in the densely populated town of Hudson Truckway?
No specific study was done, but we did a lot of research on other studies that have been done in similar dense populations, and that's where that data that we presented earlier came from.
Okay. From Susan Bain, as a resident in the town of Claverick, am concerned about more truck traffic, especially dump trucks through the intersection of 9H and 23B. Which of the three finalists has the fewest additional trucks going through this intersection, please?
Take that one.
Yeah, any of the ones not using 9H, so that would be 6 and 1A and 1B would be the ones that would put the fewest amount of trucks through that area.
Mary Luft asked, can you explore alternative ways to reach out to residents of the Claverick Hamlet?
I guess I'll just say yes, if you want to reach out to me after the meeting, I'd love to talk to you more about that. Thanks, Mary.
All right. Donna Davy asked, would you please describe where the new road in option 3 would be located? It is difficult to see from the images provided. Does it follow Humane Society Road? Thank you.
It does follow Humane Society Road for a portion. There's a National Grid easement there, and we're crossing 66 as well for that intersection. So we primarily have hugged the outside or inside pieces of the property to try to leave as much remainder of the property as possible.
Okay. We have, at this point, we have 10 more Q&As and then 2 people with their hands raised. So I'll go through a couple more Q&As and then we'll get to the hand raised. How would the flooding issue on Spook Rock be addressed? Usually at least once or twice a year, the road is closed due to flooding. Many other times there is water on part of the road, forcing drivers to utilize the other side of the road to pass.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's, going forward, if that option that uses that road is chosen, that is part of the investigation, not only just the roadway, but the drainage and hydraulics associated with that. We wouldn't want to, it's terrible that happens today, but certainly wouldn't want that to happen for a truck route and stop truck traffic and have them reroute through other means or local. So that would be addressed in the future design portions of that project.
Linda Mooseman says, not considering Colarusso gravel trucks in the study seems to be short-sighted. The new route proposed by Colarusso would be relevant to this truck problem. I believe we've answered that.
We've answered that, yes.
Yep. All right, so we'll go to the couple people who have their hands raised. Let's go with Thomas Payne. Thomas, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Thomas, are you with us? All right, so we'll go ahead back to William Meismer.
Hey, thanks again. Real quick. So you've brought up that some of the new routes would need to have improvements made to the infrastructure with new bridges or widening or what have you. But when you look at those improvements versus the situation on the existing truck route, do you see the conditions in the existing truck route being demonstrably worse than the proposed new routes? So is the situation like worse today on the ground for the existing route than it is for some of the new routes that you've proposed, even if you didn't make any improvements? Does that make any sense, what I'm asking?
I think so. I'll start, maybe Chad can jump in. The existing truck routes were built, they're New York State routes, built to handle pavement structure-wise these trucks. So the axle loading and the truck vibrations, let's call them, through there can handle those a lot better than something that's not designed for that capacity. So we, in my opinion, adding these trucks over the period of 24 hours that we've, so 100 trucks over 24 hours, give or take, should not make a detriment to that existing infrastructure on those existing truck routes. Obviously, that the non-existing truck routes that are not made for that payment structure section is not going to be able to handle that as good as the existing route.
Okay, so in other words, the current truck route is better built to handle trucks than the proposed new routes, generally speaking?
In part, the existing routes that handle trucks today, tomorrow, as Chad pointed out. The proposed routes that are not on truck routes definitely need to be upgraded to handle that capacity.
Mhm. And that's purely from like a weight management perspective. But what about from like a population density perspective? And did you look at anything from that point of view, or was it really more like infrastructure?
We focused on the infrastructure, keeping in mind, obviously we didn't use a blind eye to put these where we put them, and we did analyze what the potential effects would be for each of these options. And that's why we tried to come up with 12 to kind of, give everybody, including ourselves, here's everything possible that we can think of. And then we retracted from that. Some of them really didn't make sense. Some of them kind of made sense, and some of them made more sense than others. So a lot of factors, if you read the report at all, went into this process. And we're trying to give, everybody the best solution that we possibly can.
Thanks.
All right. So moving on to back to Thomas Payne. Thomas, are you with us? You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi. I just want to pick up on the issue of the existing engineering of the roadways that are currently in use. The New York State road standard is obviously higher than the standard of these rural roads that populate any part of New York in this area. And I think it's really important to understand the ecology of those local roadways and their immediate environment. Spook Rock, for example, does flood, but it also has a kind of fragile dimension. There are places where the road passes very close to pretty old agricultural buildings that are part of the rural heritage. And so, it might be easy if the criteria was to take all the trucks away from people, you would drill them always through the most pristine adjacent landscape. And I just think that really has to be studied with a different lens than a pure sort of engineering lens. And the cost will obviously be, I look at the cost of the $7 million for the Spook Rock, and if you're re-engineering the road to avoid water invasion at the time of a flood, I think you're maybe kidding yourself with that price.
Thank you for your comment.
All right, so that's all the people with their hands raised. At this point, we have 10 questions and comments in the Q&A. Do we want to go through the rest of the 10 there?
Yes, please.
Okay. From Ian Nishke, Route 23B has a remarkable collection of historic homes, some close to the road that shake when speeding over 40 miles per hour. When large trucks drive by, the state and federal governments are required to take into account the impacts on natural register and historic houses. Please give this greater consideration.
Thank you.
Okay. Linda Moosman, the proposed Caluso Hall Road could have further impact on this truck study. It seems like it needs to be a consideration when we think about the rerouting of trucks. Thank you. Susan Bain, I am concerned about using the poll during this session to select options. Having looked at the report earlier and the information quickly presented tonight, it is difficult to understand the impact on each of the routes presented. Maybe a way to better show the variables for the final 6 options for more detailed consideration. Okay. From Anonymous, you keep talking about reconfiguring the intersection of Newman and Hiscox. Let's be honest, both of those roads would have to be completely reconstructed. They are approximately 18 feet wide and have a 10-ton weight limit.
Agreed.
Okay. From John Bradley, did we understand you correctly when you said that none of the alternative routes would reduce truck traffic through the hamlet of Claverick?
Is that when you?
As far as our study goes, we were focusing on the city of Hudson, not the hamlet of Claverack. But as a result of some of our options, it would not affect the existing travel patterns that go through to Claverack as far as trucks go.
Okay. From Donna Streets, what is the option selection process and who ultimately decides what alternate option will be pursued?
Like I said earlier, we're going to take all this great information, and there's a lot of it, into consideration, all the factors, pricing, locale, environment, and then discuss that with the city and collectively come up with what we believe is the feasible option for the project. That will be put out there for the public to see, and I'm sure there's going to be avenues for a further comment after the study is completed.
Okay. From Carol McCraney, please elaborate on damages acknowledged by the city that is ongoing to our historic buildings. Affirm that the plan is to divert a good majority of current heavy truck traffic away from coursing through 3rd Street and other critical junctures of town.
3rd Street is the city, correct?
Yeah. Yes, that is the current plan, is to divert as many through trucks as possible out of the city.
From Anonymous, Newman Road is also a recreation road, and it seems like this topic was originally brought up based on frustration with Colarusso trucks. Doesn't Colarusso own property directly along Route 9? If the problem with Colarusso trucks is about them going through Hudson, why wouldn't their preferred new construction road be a road between 9 and 9G have been considered?
I assume that's the Hull Road?
Yes, that's what they're talking about.
Yes, that's under consideration from the city itself. We are aware of that process, but this study assumed that was not taking place, and we focused on that not happening. However, if that does take place, obviously that's going to take those trucks, contribute to what we're trying to do in this study.
I guess I also just want to clarify that the through truck traffic through Hudson is beyond. It's not just Colarusso trucks. So just to clarify that the through truck traffic, there's some overlapping issues around Colarusso and truck traffic, but just doing one doesn't necessarily address the other.
Okay, so the next one is from Mary Koch. I live on Fish and Game Road, which is already being widened. And just for the record, when eminent domain was used on my property, there was no negotiating or supportive conversations from Claverack officials. It was a letter from some non-local agency, and I had no say in any part of this road plan and its impact on my water, well, pond, etc. Okay. Next from Susan Bain. Appreciate all the information. Wondering what the margin of error might be on predicting how the trucks will behave with the options.
I'll take that.
Not sure what.
I assume that means, are we, 10% high, 10% low on the number of trucks?
Yeah, what we did with the truck volumes was we collected data over a 5-day period that included Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday during the week, and also a Saturday and Sunday. We looked at the origin destination data over a 12-hour period during one of those days. And we used those and applied those to the weekly averages to come up with those numbers. Yes, there is some margin of error in that. Those are averages, and they could fluctuate. And, there's also things that, we can't take into account, like other regional development and other things that could also modify those numbers in the future.
Okay, so our next one is from Ives Jakes. Has several points. One, not just a Hudson problem, needs to consider the county as a whole. Two, it's not just about routes, it's about speed limits, use of air brakes and horns, etc. It should embrace a basic public health hazard minimization approach. 3, without an enforcement and incentive plan, it is unlikely to be effective given our experience at the Bermuda Triangle of Columbia and Prospect given our experience at the Bermuda Triangle of Columbia and Prospect is that trucks seem to do pretty much whatever they want. Okay. And our last one is from Sarah Van Buren. She says, hi there, I already asked this, and Donna also did. I am unable to tell from the report where exactly the extensions are for option 3. Is it possible to get a zoom in image, or can someone quickly just note more specifically where they would be? Pulcher Ave, Humane Society Road, and something running parallel to Fish and Game?
Yes, we can provide a blow up picture of that to give you an idea of what that looks like, and that could be posted with the report.
Okay. So that is everybody. So we are all set.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your comments.
Yep, and I just want to reiterate that there are still 42 people on the call, so thank you for participating. If you want to continue to send us comments or questions, you can send that to the project email at hudsontruckstudy@gmail.com. And again, comments for this will be received up to May 4th. And a recording of the webinar will be presented on the project website, the City of Hudson website at the link below.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation in today's session and ongoing on this issue. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everyone.